Guys, it's John. Hey, I haven't done a video in a while, and I just want to apologize for that. I have had a crazy bunch of stuff going on. I just moved, and then when we moved, we had a little bitty fire in our new place. It's a small one, you know, but it did burn up all my detailing stuff. Whoops. So my bike's dirty, and it's going to have to stay that way until I replace some of this stuff. And just a few other things kind of going on in life, just kind of keeping me really busy, so I haven't had time. But I figured today I would I do a little video on buying a used motorcycle. Now, I noticed a lot of you guys that watch my videos are new to riding or are buying your first bike, and a lot of you are going to buy a used bike. And I thought, well, I ought to do a quick video on techniques for buying a used motorcycle and basically what to look for. So looks like I have to stop recording and start recording again and flip the camera around. But I will see you guys in a second. We'll look at my bike, and we'll look at it in the eye of if you were going to buy my bike, what sort of things I would want you to look for and check out and know before you bought it. Okay, guys. Okay, guys, so here's my bike. You've seen it before. If you haven't, there's a video I have on my channel. It's an overview of my bike. So it's a 2006 Vulcan 900 Classic LT, but there's a few little things wrong with it, and a few other things are just kind of wore out, and I think it's a perfect bike to look at for looking at a used bike because there's a few red flags on this bike, and it's my bike, and I ride it a lot, and it's got a lot of miles on it, so that's really okay for me. But if you're going to buy this bike, there's a few things you'd want to look at. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start from the bottom to the top, and we're going to inspect, kind of do our pre-purchase inspection, okay? So a pre-purchase inspection is an inspection we're going to do on our motorcycle. And excuse the mess, by the way, I've been repainting the garage. So this is the garage. There's my wife's car, or wife's bike, sorry, mower. There's my car. Her car, my wife drives a Mustang, and it is at work with her. I'm off today, so that's why I'm doing this video. Anyway, so a pre-purchase inspection is an inspection we do of a vehicle before we buy it. And so the first thing we're going to look at is accessories. We're going to kind of start from the top to the bottom. We're going to look at this windshield. Well, I've done my research on this bike, as you should have. And I would know that this is a factory windshield. So the thing I want to look at is that it hasn't been modified in any way. That it doesn't have evidence of being cut down poorly, you know, like somebody taking a die grinder to it and sticking a torch to it. It would have little puddles or pools up things here. Evidence of the brackets being modified to change the angle or anything else like that. It should look stock. If it's a stock windshield, it should look stock. It should look like it came out of the factory. If it doesn't, you need to talk with the owner about that and find out why it's different and figure out if it's still okay for you to buy, and if it is, figure out if you should still be paying the price that they're asking. Moving on down, we're going to look at the mirrors. Those look stock. So we're going to again check and make sure that they're in great shape and that they're connected properly. Oh, look at that, some zip ties here. I'm going to ask the owner about that, and the owner, me, is going to tell you, oh, I used to have a remote for a stereo system there, and I took it off, and I never have cut the zip ties off. Okay. So we're wanting to make sure those zip ties aren't holding anything on. Zip ties, electrical tape, duct tape, those are big red flags to watch out for. We're going to look at all the switches. In a moment, we're going to check and make sure that they all work. We're just going to kind of take a look at them and see how they look. Another red flag here. Notice this. Real careful. If I can zoom in, there we go. Do you see how this is kind of cracked and scratched up here? That's evidence that brake fluid has dripped out of that master cylinder. So you want to ask the owner why. If he doesn't know why, you need to be concerned that maybe that master cylinder seal is broken. I can tell you why. I change my brake fluid every year, and one time I spilled a little bit. So with that knowledge, then we're going to automatically go around here, and we're going to look, and we're going to see if there's any paint missing or any other damage. Hit a button wrong. I hate taking videos on my iPhone, but I don't have a good video camera. I have a DSLR, which takes really good video, but it's a pain to carry around for doing something like this, I've found. Anyway, so something else I've noticed is that there's an aftermarket thing right here. I'm going to ask the owner what that is, and he's going to tell me that's a turn signal reminder because I'm stupid and I keep leaving my turn signal on when I'm going down the highway. And it's wired into the headlight bucket where the wires for the turn signal go. So I'm going to want to see that, and the owner may not want me to do that, but if you can, you're going to want to see how the wiring looks. And on this bike, you just take off a couple of screws. I'm not going to do it for you guys, sorry, I don't love you that much. I'm going to take off a couple of screws, and I'm going to pop that cover off, and I'm going to look and see that the connections are soldered and shrink wrapped, which is what I want to see, rather than little crimpy things clamped on and a bunch of electrical tape, which is meaning a turn signal is going to fail one day. I'm going to look at all the chrome, look for evidence of pitting, rust, scratches. Because this bike has seen rain and because it's got so many miles on it, it's going to have a little bit of rust. That's normal. I'm anticipating that. That's why I'm not paying full price for it. That's why you wouldn't pay $30,000 for this motorcycle. Excuse me. Look at the air cleaner. Having researched this bike, I'll know that if it's overfilled, that some oil will drip and leak over here. Doesn't seem like any, so that means that the owner has been putting the proper amount of oil in it and changed the oil correctly. Moving on to more aftermarket stuff, these aftermarket saddlebags. I know from my research beforehand, guys, that's so important. You've got to research the bike before you buy it. I know from my research beforehand that no saddlebag like this comes factory. So again, I'm looking at the brackets. The brackets look secure, they look like they were done well. No cutting or drilling was done to install them, and that's good. I can see that, but I see another wire. So again, I'm going to want to pop the seat off, and I'm going to look at that aftermarket wire and see how it's installed, and again, find that it's soldered and shrink wrapped, which makes me happy. Then I'm going to look at this other aftermarket saddlebag, or tour pack, and look on inside. Well, I can see that the owner tried to use Plasti Dip to make it look nicer in here, and found out that that didn't work, but that's no big deal. It's just Plasti Dip, it peels off. All the brackets and everything else look good, the hinges look good. So this looks good. The owner needs to clean it out though. Looking at the backrest that's on here, I can see that it's faded and it has some spotting on it from the sun and things like that. But you know, I anticipated something like that when I'm buying a used bike, and that's all just part of the negotiation of the price. I see some aftermarket tail lights, but those went to those wires up there, but that's something to check and make sure they work. Next saddlebag, we check the same things, and again, we open it up and see, you know, that everything looks in order. We look at pegs and things like that. We're looking at the shifter. We're looking for a shifter play. It shouldn't wobble back and forth. It should just go down and up. And kind of looking over, and this is kind of our first visual inspection. Okay? Next, we need to test for functionality. Oh, I forgot something real quick. We need to look at the speedometer cluster. So in the speedometer cluster, we have chrome. We want to make sure that that's not all scratched and pitted. And here's another big tell. Okay, here's something that can really give you a lot of information. Do you see my speedometer needle? It's not supposed to be white. It's supposed to be yellow. And you can kind of tell a little bit that right up here, there's a little bit of yellow left. That means that this bike has spent a lot of time out in the sun, and it has. I didn't used to have a garage when I first got this bike, and so it was parked outside, oftentimes under a cover, oftentimes not. And we do a lot of trips where the bike ends up spending a week outside. So it's seen a lot of time outside, so it's got sun fading. If that's a problem for you, you need to be considerate of that. Personally, it's not a problem for me, because the only damage it's going to do to the bike is going to fade things out. It hasn't faded the speedometer face out. It has faded the needles out a little bit, but that's far from the end of the world. You can also see some sun having attacked this cup holder. It's just kind of faded and stuff. That's no big deal for me. It might be a big deal for you. Next, we're going to test functionality. So we're going to turn the key on. We don't need to start it yet. We're going to turn the key on. We're going to look first at the odometer. So we see it's in clock mode now. That works. Hit mode. 29,000 miles. Okay, well, that's what he advertised. Okay. And we're looking to see that there's no lights that don't make sense. Everything seems to work. And on this bike, when you first start it up, all the lights but the fuel and water temperature light come on. So that little fuel injection light comes on. We want to see that come on. And then I've done my research, so I know that that light comes on. The reason I want to know the fuel injection light comes on is because I want to make sure that it's not disabled. Because if it stays on, it means there's a problem with the fuel injection. The light that's on now means low oil pressure. Well, the engine's not running, so of course it's low oil pressure. So we're going to look and kind of make sure everything else works. We got our turn signal, and I'm not going to go through all this and spend all your time, but you get the idea. We turn on both turn signals, and we see that both turn signals work, right? On this particular bike, because I've done my research, I know that you have to press the starter button before the headlight will come on, but I don't have to start it. So just press the button one time. It's got to be in neutral. Press the button one time, and now my headlight's on. So with the headlight on, I can test my bright lights and make sure all that works. And so on and so forth. You get the idea. You're testing the functionality of everything. And then finally, you're going to start it. And you're going to listen for a good, solid idle. It should idle. Fuel-injected bikes like this should idle smoothly, even when cold, no problem. Okay. Now, the last thing we're going to check is we're going to do a quick mechanical inspection. And that means we're going to get down the engine. We're going to shut the key off. Go down the engine. It's filthy, as I said, from the ash and stuff, from that little shelf catching fire. But, you know, that's what happens. And so what we're looking for is we're looking for big cracks. We're looking for fluids leaking, especially up in here. You see up here there's a radiator hose, so I want to make sure there's no fluid leaking, no green, crusty coolant anywhere. And this is kind of the kind of stuff where you're going to have to research your own bike and look for things. If it's liquid cooled, you have to look for this. If it's air cooled, guess what? You won't have a radiator, so you don't have to look for this. But I'm also looking at hoses and lines, looking for any leaking oil or anything else like that. And on this bike, I happen to know that the stator is a common failure item. The stator's inside here, and it's what charges the battery and keeps the electrical system going. I happen to know that they're notoriously unreliable. So I'll ask the owner about that, and the owner will tell me that I replaced it with an aftermarket unit. Otherwise, you just have to remember that that's probably going to fail on this particular bike. The next thing, and I want to show you something, speaking of stator failure, is you're going to want to take a rag, and you're going to want to kind of wipe the bottom of the engine and around these covers and that kind of stuff, and look what we're going to find, all kinds of grease. Well, grease is one thing, but if it seems wet or fresh, or if we can kind of find a source, like some fresh oil, that means we've got a very small leak. Now, there's no leak, there's no oil underneath the bike, and it looks like there is in the camera. I see that now, but that's actually dirt. And I can see where it was parked and see that there's no oil there either. By the way, getting a long garage is nice because I can fit both bikes, both cars, and the mower in the garage. But anyway, so I'm going to look, and I happen to know the issue here. The issue is when I replaced that stator, the gasket didn't seal properly, so I have a very tremendously, incredibly slow leak. In fact, when I changed the oil after 5,000 miles, it hasn't even leaked out enough for it to really register. I still am full of oil. So it's basically seeping out just a tiny bit, not even enough to drip. And in reality, it's probably only seeping out when oil pressure is high, like at high RPMs. So I know that, but if I were going to buy that, I would have to understand that that's an issue that I need to watch out for because it could leak later on. And it's something that I, as the owner, or you as the buyer, need to do at some point with that bike, is to drain the oil. Probably the next time I change the oil, I will. When I change the oil, I'll drain it, I'll pull that cover off, and I'll replace the gasket, put the cover back on, and fill it back up with oil. It's no big deal, but it just needs to be done. So that's kind of your pre-purchase inspection. I figured I'd give you that as a few tips to kind of inspect the bike. Another thing you want to check, by the way, I keep forgetting stuff. This is why I need a script. You were looking for wheels. You want to look for kind of along these edges. You want to look for any dents or major gouges or damage. You want to look at the tires, see how they're wearing. This one's good. I know the back tire is bad. There's a new one right there, and that's what I'm going to do today, is going to go put a new back tire on it. We're also going to look at brakes. So on this bike, the rotors seem good. I wouldn't want to touch these if it's just going out riding, but since it's been sitting, I know I can. So the rotors seem good, and the pads seem good. And we do for the same for the back, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of it. Those are the kind of big things you want to check out and look out for. And some other suggestions for buying a used bike is to first, like I said several times already, research it first. Know everything you can possibly know about your bike before you buy it. That means researching the make and model, researching the year. You might find that certain years had issues that other years didn't have, so you know which years you want. You definitely want to research their reliability, because a Vulcan 900 with 30,000 miles isn't a big deal, but a certain year Harley-Davidson Softail, which had notorious issues for timing chain failures around 50,000 miles, that's definitely a bike you want to stay away from with 30,000 miles, because in 20,000 miles, there's a good likelihood that you're going to have a very expensive repair on your hands. Whereas this bike, guys have had this thing up to 150,000, 200,000 miles and haven't had any issues yet. So 30,000 miles, there really is no reason to be concerned about. I'm not. And I love this bike, and I'll keep it for a long time. So guys, I hope you enjoy it. I hope you enjoy the video. I hope it helps when you're going out. And maybe I'll do another video on techniques for going to dealers and kind of getting the best price to the dealer. I've done pretty good on both of these bikes. This is my wife. She's seen it before. And, you know, your first bike is a pretty big and pretty important purchase. It's always going to be your first bike. Even if you trade it in a month, it's always going to be your first bike. So take good care of it and look carefully at it and make sure that the guy who had it before you took good care of it. Unless you buy new, but if you're watching it this far, you probably aren't. So thanks for watching, guys, and God bless.